Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of SCMP MMA Live Chat. I am your host, JHK, and today we got a very good guest. The reason why he's a great guest is because he's going to delve into an aspect of MMA combat sports that a lot of you guys might know about and a lot of you guys might not know about it, which is the gambling side, so to say, the betting side, the analyst side. I guess it all ties in. Mike from Mike's MMA Picks, Odds Breakers. Where else can we find you, Mike?
MMA Odds Breaker, BetMMA.tips, and mostly on Twitter. I'll be honest, I'm just grateful to be on that platform. There are so many amazing users who are able to give us great content, and especially yourself. I'll be honest, John, I wanted to get this off my chest right off the bat here that I consider you an international treasure, and the interviews that you do on a consistent basis, they really shine, and just very grateful for that. One of the key nuggets of information that I take away every single fight week brought to you. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just mutual respect. You know what I mean? Like, we do totally different things in this space, in the MMA space. But I watch you and I watch your show from time to time about like how you break down fights and how you see certain fighters, and when you go back and look at the last couple of outings that they've had, and it makes me think about a lot of the fighters, you know what I mean? Like heading into a fight differently because of like you, and last week we had Dan Tom on who does kind of a similar thing. And yeah, man, without you guys, it makes my job a little bit harder because I guess it's a symbiotic relationship, right?
Definitely. I mean, I'll be honest. When I'm breaking down fights, there are so many different things that we look at. Of course, the tape is number one. The tape never lies. What you see is what you get. Another key component of something that I live by is don't trust what you haven't seen. So even in your interviews, sometimes you'll hear a fighter say that they're going to try something new, and they're talking about a game plan that you've never seen them implement during a fight, and it's hard to trust that sometimes. So you have to really sift through and watch previous interviews too to see if a fighter is a man of his word or a woman of her word. Yep. So there are many different aspects to it.
Also, you're saying that sometimes you'll see an interview leading up to a fight and they say something different, like something that they're going to try new, and then you'll go back to the previous fights in those interviews and see if they said something and look at the performance that they had after those fights or after those interviews?
Correct. For instance,
wow.
Let's say a fighter A is coming in and you know that their viable path to victory is a grappling heavy approach, yet they've fallen in love with their stand-up. How many times have we seen wrestlers do that? And they say, all right, I'm going to stand and bang with this fighter. And you know that that's detrimental to the path to victory. So you have to go back and see if they've done that before, if they've fallen in love with this new skill set, if they haven't forgotten about the roots. So those are just some minute components that I take into account when I'm capping fights.
Yeah, that's so interesting. So let's dive into, like, first thing is capping fights, like that term. I don't know what that means. So explain that to me. I'm a newbie.
Well, it goes a little bit deeper than picking who you expect to win. You want to take a look at possible outcomes and implied probabilities. So the percentage that you think something in the fight is going to take place at, and then you also, from our end, from folks who are wagering on the fights, for example, they want to look for that edge where they think the odds may be potentially off and you have an advantage, and then you want to strike there. But you also don't want to let the odds lure you into picking losers, because the books sometimes will make things seem very tempting, and you have to be careful, because at the end of the day, you're risking your hard-earned money, and you got to be careful. Bankroll management is key.
Yeah, there's that the addiction side to the gambling is the dirty side of that, right? And I've seen that happen to a lot of people where it's a rabbit hole, I guess, so to say. But we don't want to be negative about it. We want to just focus on like what's going on, like with that, and then you got the DFS. Okay, can you break down that for me?
Sure, sure. So in around 2014, I joined over at Roto Grinders, and then started playing. They had these daily fantasy sports, they call it. So they have all different types of contests. There was a website called Draft Street. Before DraftKings, there was a place called War Draft. Many other sites besides FanDuel and DraftKings. And they started offering, Counter Move was another one. They started offering events where you have salary-based fighters and you have to stay under a certain salary cap and roster 5 or 6 fighters to create an individual lineup. And once you have that unique lineup, you enter it into different contests. And the players that you roster accrue points. And it depends on which site you're playing at, but they accrue points a little bit differently. So if your fighter is advancing, you get a certain amount of points. If your fighter is throwing significant strikes and landing, you get a certain amount of points for that. If you're landing takedowns, you get points for that. And then knockdowns. And a key component of this also is the what's called fight metric. UFC has used them traditionally to calculate the stats. And basically, you're at the mercy of who's calculating those scores. So some nights you'll see ridiculously high scores, and then on other nights you'll see scores that just don't make sense. Like I believe Jared Gordon had a fight recently where they only counted a handful of significant strikes, yet he was out there putting in some serious work.
Yeah,
that's
it's
DraftKings
very
in a nutshell. And then what happens is you enter your lineup into contests, and depending on how your lineup performs versus the field, you earn a certain amount of money. So, like for instance, not this most recent card, but the one prior to 256, I ended up with one lineup in the contest, ended up taking down the throwdown, which was a $100,000 to first place. But since we were only down to 8 fights on that card because of all the cancellations, it ended up being chopped up. That 100 grand ended up getting chopped up between 115 different people. Mm-hmm. And one person actually ran the same lineup 10 times in that specific contest. So when you are playing DraftKings, there are different types of contests that you can enter, and then there are limits to the amount of lineups that you can submit. So the one that I ended up playing had a max entry of 150 lineups. So you, as one player, could enter 150 maximum lineups, 150 different lineups. So I only entered one and ended up winning that one. But then they also have contests where they're called single entry. So you're only allowed one lineup. So it depends on how much money you're playing with on a given night, and also what your strategy is. Obviously, somebody who is going to be playing max entry, and I'm not that type of player who plays 150 lineups, but if you're approaching it from that angle, it's much different than someone who's playing a single entry or 3 entries per contest. So you got to pick and choose and find out where your strengths lie. That's a huge piece of the puzzle too. And it takes experience to figure that out. It does take sometimes losing to learn how to win. There's one of my favorite quotes is, "Only after you've been through the deepest of valleys can you appreciate the view from the highest of mountains." And I believe that wholeheartedly. And it takes experience to get there.
So with yourself, are you're mainly focused on DFS, or what about parlays and, these, like single bets, live betting? This is all part of it, right?
Yeah. I split mine about 80% the bets, 20% DFS. Mm-hmm. And then I'll be honest with with parlays, I I am not fond of parlays. I don't see folks getting up to potential outcomes at the same time. You're inherently taking on more risk by doing that. So I am a fan of more straight plays where you're picking one outcome. It can be very enticing if you're trying to, like, if you put a 6 or 8 or 12 team parlay and you see this amount one at the bottom of the screen, or potentially the amount one, but you know how many things have to happen for that to ring true and you hit the jackpot. It's challenging. In a way, it's almost as challenging as creating the optimal lineup for DraftKings. So you have to think that lineup that's going to win that contest and the big money, so to speak, you really need to maximize for each single fight the best possible outcome for all 6 fighters that you have chosen. And you're playing in a field against sometimes 25, 28,000 other people in one contest. So it can be challenging, but that's where the magic happens, and through experience and also just finding your strengths. For instance, like with myself, I'll be honest, lightweights, for some reason, lightweights, I've struggled. If you look statistically, there's a website, it's called betmma.tips, and Mike does a great job over there putting that site together. So you can track everything that you do, every bet that you have in place, the amount of units risked per wager, etc. And he has a way of even breaking down how you perform in each specific weight class. So, for instance, I've excelled at men's flyweight, bantamweight, and featherweight. Those are my 3 areas that have been my wheelhouse. But light heavyweight and lightweight I've struggled with. But it just comes with experience, finding your strengths.
What is a unit?
A unit is, well, some people don't acknowledge that units exist, but a unit has a monetary denomination to it. So, for instance, if somebody makes a 1 unit play, they could be playing with $10 units or $100 units or $1,000 units. So what it does is kind of level the playing field, and it takes the monetary value out of it. So someone who's playing with $10 units could be, when you're talking about skill for skill and outcome for outcome, who produces the higher rate of profit, basically. So let's say if somebody's making a 5 unit play, that traditionally, most handicappers out there will do between 1 and a max of 5 units. Occasionally, you'll see somebody throw out a 10 unit play, etc. I don't buy into that. I've never, in thousands of plays that I've posted, I've never posted anything over 7 units. Literally thousands of plays. So my approach is to chip away 1 fight or just a few, try and pick my spots, so a few opportunities per card. Whereas some folks are successful risking 30 plus units across all of the fights on the card. So it depends where you find your strengths, and that's really, it comes down to experience, learning what you're good at, what you're not good at, and taking the time to assess. And really, I'm grateful that we're doing the show at the end of the year, because this is the time of year when people look back on 2020 and they assess where they're meeting their goals. Did they make any fundamental changes in their approach to capping, etc. So it's a learning experience, card by card. My little
that's a great explanation of units, because I had no idea, because I would see on Twitter like people putting up like 5 units, and I'm like, what is a unit? Like, what is 5 units? What is this guy? 1 unit, 2 units? But it could mean totally different numbers then. And some guys put 30 units. It could be 1 unit could be $1, so it's $30, right? Correct. So it could be kind of an illusion in a way, right? Like how much money they're making.
Right. That is correct. So what you have to do is, if you look at the betmma.tips website, you can scroll through different handicappers and assess where people are coming from, how they approach each individual fight card. And you really have to be disciplined. Otherwise, bankroll could potentially go down the drain. And assessing risk is huge. It's one of the most important aspects of this whole game. And you know, Twitter's great because we're all in it together. We all there are so many different great outlets like yourself and other analysts out there that we take a look at their work and we listen to breakdowns, and then you have this pool of knowledge that you work with. But you also need to drown out some of the noise too, which is a challenge too, because there are false narratives out there that some folks may latch onto, and you have to take those with a grain of salt, because recency bias is a real thing. If we have fighters who potentially, if they have a great showing, but you've seen them fight for a minute, the odds might be inflated because of that. Yet we've only seen, let's say, a minute of their fight time versus literally hours of fight time that other folks have had in the octagon. But there are a lot of things that drive the price of fighters, and we just have to sit back and piece through all the information and make the best decisions we can with the resources available to us.
I believe that with betting and capping and fantasy plays and all of that, it's great for the sport because it drives people from outside of the sport to watch the sport more, because you know what's great, what's better than watching sports? Betting on sports, because you get invested emotionally. And for like a person that's not, because I consider you're a professional, but there's like just regular people out there that might put a bet or two on each card, right? Which makes them watch the card, which makes the sport grow. Do you believe that it comes in hand in hand?
Oh, no, I agree. Recreational folks drive the industry, and if it wasn't COVID time right now, it would be putting fannies in the seats. And that's one thing that I'm looking forward to hopefully in the next year, getting back to the octagon and getting back to, you know, the arenas where you can feel the electricity in the air. And that's really something that got me involved in this. Was I've had the opportunity to experience Pride Fighting Championships, you know, in real life, and feel the bass hit my chest, and you know, watch fighters like Takanori Gomi, you know, in his prime come out, and then also, you know, the UFC and PFL and Bellator, Strikeforce. I got to really soak all of that in, and that got the juices flowing for this, you know. And then to have daily fantasy sports and have something to look forward to every weekend, because that's the one thing, John, that this sport doesn't have, is an off season. And I love it. That you every single week, except we're coming up to December 19th. This card, we have almost a month-long break right after this.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's going to be a challenge, but that is a great time to keep the nose against the grindstone. Look at all the other matchups. I know we've been losing matchups left and right due to COVID cancellations, etc. But that creates new opportunities, and if we're able to cap fights and look into the future, that's great too. What I like to do is, if I can, break down fights before the odds come out, so that I can assess who I favor, at what percentage, etc. And then when odds makers do their thing and we get the odds, then we're able to see where there's potentially value to be had.
Yeah, everybody, you guys, if you're watching this, you need to go check out his show on MMA Odds Breakers. I believe it's every morning of the fights.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, live
card breakdown show. But when I do that show, I really I take 20 to 30 hours of research and break it down to 30 minutes. So what you're getting there from me is a very brief synopsis of how I see the fight potentially playing out, and then I'll simply pick who I feel is going to be the potential winner of the fight. But there's more depth to that happens behind the scenes. So what I'm doing behind the scenes is I'm actually capping who when we're talking odds and underdogs and favorites, etc. Where the values to be had, but what I try to do with that specific show is take a look at the DraftKings price, take a look at the odds, take a look at who potentially I see winning the fight. So there's some value to be had on favorites. You don't want to risk, 8 to 1, 5 to 1. You have to be careful here because you don't want to risk too much. But with DraftKings, what's nice is the highest priced fighter you'll see is 9,300, 9,400. And then the lowest price fighter, when we're talking salaries, is 6,800, 6,600, etc. So when we're breaking down the fights in the morning breakdown show there, we're also looking at odds value and salary value. So a fighter who's priced at 7,800, let's say they opened as an underdog, and then we have closing line value. So right when they close the octagon door, you're going to see when the contest lineup locks, you'll have an idea of where the closing odds are sitting. And you'll see, that fighter was priced at 7,800, but they're a -160 betting favorite. So that's potentially, Vegas is right more often than they're wrong. So in that case, that would be an odds value based play in DraftKings. And on my morning breakdown show, we'll take a look at and point out if there's odds value to be had on the salary. Yeah, so I try to look at it from a few different angles, but the challenge though is doing it in 30 minutes. So if like, for instance, a 15 fight card coming up on Saturday, so that's going to be challenging. But typically I'll spend 2 to 3 minutes per fight. But you can trust that there's 20 to 30 hours of research going into those 30 minutes that I'm speaking. So it does create some challenges when we're talking about time management.
At the start of the show, when you first began the show, you're dressed very casually, and then somewhere in the middle, you started to throw in the tie. Why did you decide to do that?
Yeah. Well, I said, you know what, the audience deserves a little something there, and I decided to just pick up the intensity. Decided to be more professional about it, and realize that folks who may be tuning in, they're taking my advice seriously. So hey, I wake up at sometimes 5:30 in the morning on a Saturday to record the show under my own free will, just because I love the sport and I love giving back to the community. And that's one thing that I got to say is I'm so grateful to everybody out there, not only who's tuned into the show, but who's taught me something along the way too, because this isn't a one-man effort. I try to take a little something from everybody, try to learn a little something from everybody, and nobody is bigger than this game. The one thing I will say that this is my biggest piece of advice for anybody, even for myself, there are no certainties in this game. There are no definitive outcomes. Anything can happen in mixed martial arts, and as Joe Rogan said when Chris Weidman knocked out Anderson Silva, he made a mistake and paid for it with his consciousness. You cannot play games in the octagon, and we're trying to make bets, educated guesses, and clear decisions on outcomes that involve other human beings, two human beings inside of an octagon who are competing against one another. So, of course, there are uncontrollables, so to speak, and things that we can't control that happen during the fights. And we just realize when we're assessing risk that is something that we need to, even though it's a small risk, you still need to take that into consideration. So,
has this been the most successful year for you?
2 or 3 years ago, I had a similar type of year, but as far as the ROI goes, return on investment, this year has been the most successful in that aspect. And I really, one thing that I've tried to do is pick my spots. And I can't say that that's going to work for everybody because you need to find out what your strengths are. But what I've tried to do is really focus on value, closing line value, and picking winners too. I want to be right much more than I want to be wrong. And I've had a knack for that too. That I consider one of my strengths also is with MMA Odds Breaker, we have our staff picks every week. So every week on right after weigh-ins, we send over who we predict will win. And there are about 10 or 12 of us in there. And at the end of the year, we have a tally. And so I've been leading that heading into the final event. And that's something that I'm pretty proud of. But there's a lot of other pieces of the puzzle too. So it isn't just picking the winners. There's way more to that. But if you are playing DraftKings and you have a fighter who does win, you get points based on a decision win, based on a first round finish, a second round finish, third round finish, fourth round finish, and fifth round finish. So picking the winners is a little extra gravy, of course, in that respect. And if you do lose one fight, unless there's something called stacking, where you can actually play two fighters who are competing against one another in your lineup. Two of the 6 fighters, those could be potentially fighters who are competing against one another, and those 2 fighters have taken down. They've actually won major contests before, so you can't rule that out of the equation as well if you're playing from a DFS perspective. And we've seen that before. Some fights that Max Holloway has been in the past, etc. So I try to have a multi-prong approach. And just as I mentioned earlier, when I'm doing the homework, one of the first things I do, if I see an interview from you, I go to it and I listen to it. And I really try to pick apart what the fighters are trying to say. And when you say things like, how do you see this fight playing out? I mean, the hairs on the back of my head go up, and I'm like, all right, I got to hear this. And then I'll go to the fighter's opponent and how do you see this playing out? And I'll assess that also. But I realize that not all fighters are going to tell you everything that's going to happen. And I think that I've noticed that the kickboxing, where Adesanya is from,
City
Kickboxing, they keep things close to the vest for the most part. Yeah, and I understand. It makes sense, Dan Hooker, etc. So, but some fighters, they tell you what they're going to do, and it's up to the opponent to stop it. That's how confident they are. And I love hearing that too, because they believe in what they're saying. And that is what, to me, makes the sport so great. And it keeps me coming back, is you have 2 fighters who believe in their skill set and their will to win. And literally somebody's going to have to break it. And you have 2 fighters who, they have that undeniable will to win. And last night I tweeted something out. Share an example where will beats skill. And I saw like 30 plus people responded to that with so many great examples. And you see it happen all the time. So.
Yeah, it's just it's like what you do. It's so much investment of time, man, and then reading people. That's like some FBI, like CIA stuff right there. When you like watch an interview and you assess and you read like how they're saying things, and I guess reading between the lines. And like you said, like I always throw in those questions, and it's like an open-ended question. It's not like I try to go. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I'll ask them like, you've knocked out blah blah blah. And this is like the streak you're on. Do you want to extend this streak? Because a lot of fighters they get excited about that. You know what I mean? They get excited about their streak or what they've done the last couple of fights, and they want to extend that, right? And then there's guys like Rafael Fiziev, who just won his second straight bonus,
and got his first finish in the UFC against probably the highest profile fighter that he's faced so far in Renato Moicano. And what, you know, when you, and I interviewed him and he told me exactly, I'm going to go out there, I'm going to use my striking, probably stay off the ground and get a bonus. And he did exactly what he just said. And how many times do you see that happen? Is that common?
Yeah. Yes, I'll say it is. But also, you don't want to believe in false narratives too.
Mm-hmm.
So that's just a small piece of the puzzle. But when we're putting that big piece of the puzzle together, I do take that into account. And I actually wrote down a few things that some things that I look for. Weight class changes. You know, why is somebody changing this weight class? You know, is it because they haven't had success at the weight class that they were fighting at? Are they looking for some extra skin on the bone that they're trying to reinvigorate themselves? Like, for instance, Jose Aldo is going to be competing this weekend at 135 pounds. It's his third consecutive bout at that weight class. What forced that drop? You know, if you told me 5 years ago that that Moicano was going to be fighting at 155 pounds and Aldo was going to be fighting at 135 pounds, I'd be like, no, that's not happening. Camp changes are another thing that I try to pay attention to. Fighters who are recovering from injuries, fighters who are contemplating retirement, or who've left for multiple years and then are coming back, and then also extenuating circumstances. You know, there's life happens. You know, like for instance, some of the female fighters may leave because they're having a baby, and then they come back, and we've seen fighters shine, and then also fighters falter too. So those are just a few things I look at.
Yeah, those are definitely, you need to look at those.
The quiet hat. I don't know what's that about.
Oh, it's just the brand.
Okay,
it's just the brand. Quiet. Like, I like quiet when I'm not doing this stuff, so I guess the brand is cool. Okay. It's not like I'm saying quiet to anybody because we're here to talk, right? We're here to,
because you're a talker by nature. It seems like it, at least.
Yeah, but I'm quiet. Like, outside of this, I'm not a very social person at all. Like, people would probably be very surprised if they run into me like outside. Like, I'm avoiding any kind of, you know, small talk or whatever. You know, like, I interview fighters and those are probably the scariest people in the world to talk to because they beat people up for a living. But like, outside, I'm not too social, you know what I mean? Like, unless I know you. Like, if I ran into you, Mike, you know, we'd grab a beer or something and we'd sit down and chat it up because we have something in common. We know each other and we know where we come from. But if I'm just out there just like running into you and I don't really know you, it's just like, oh, okay, hi, bye. Basically, I'm gonna go do my thing.
And I wanted to commend you. One of your greatest gifts that I've seen while conducting interviews is simply putting the fighters at ease, where they're comfortable sharing with you, and that's a big component. You get some folks who are interviewing people will right off the bat start asking the tough questions, and that sometimes puts people on the defensive right off the bat. So you kind of get them ready, and then I'm not saying you ask the hardball questions, but you make them feel comfortable, and then it just comes so naturally, and it flows in your style of interviewing. And I got to be honest, I think you're one of the best in the game who I've ever witnessed at that. So thank you.
Man, I'm trying, man. I think that I could be 10 times better, and I guess that's what you have to do. You have to think that you could be better. You cannot be satisfied. And I've been doing this for a long time, and I look back at like interviews that I did even like 2 years ago, and I'm just like, man, what am I doing there? You know, sometimes I've ruined interviews before in the past. It's not like every time it goes smooth. So, you know, I've had criticism from people online. You know what I mean? You know how online is. You know what I mean? Like, there's probably people messaging you all the time about bets and like, you know, like, and then there's people that are successful with your advice. And that's what I love, is that you have people that follow you and take your advice, and then they're successful through this whole year along with you. And how does that feel, man, that you get these like these people, these individuals that are making money with you?
Yeah, well, I always say this: one event does not define you. This is something that is a culmination of many years of effort, and it's a long-term game. And anybody who speaks in certainties, it's tough to trust them because there are no certainties in this game. And once you have some sustained success, Graham, there's always going to be some variance. So you could put yourself up in the best spot, and then boom, it's almost like a fighter slips on the banana peels and they lose, and things like that happens. And another quote that really rings true is confidence is the liquor for fools, right? So I try to always stay level-headed, never get too high, never get too low, never rest on your laurels, and just continue one event at a time, respect everybody in the industry, and just keep grinding away one event at a time, and eventually it's going to pay off. And this year ended up being a successful year, and I'm glad for folks who've trusted my advice, and I'm going to continue on. But also, I do realize this does take a tremendous amount of time and energy and effort. And there are occasionally, you have things don't turn out the way you envisioned. And that is a part of this game too. So no one's perfect. And you just got to keep grinding away, and also look to improve, identify weaknesses, identify strengths, and try to really focus in on those. And for me, just trying to focus in on even sticking with the lower weight class fighters. Really, that's something that it almost seems like the way they fight, they're able to execute much more quickly than a light heavyweight or a heavyweight. And for me, at least, when I'm watching tape, somehow it just makes more sense to me when I see the fights playing out at the lower weight classes. There's higher probability of a finish at the higher weight classes. Folks get rocked up there, and also there's sometimes a lot of stalling against the cage, whereas you look like you've got two Tasmanian devils rolling around on the floor of the octagon. I think Paul Felder, his fight with Kai Kara France and Brandon Royval, at one point he's like, I can't even keep up with what I'm trying to say because they're moving too fast. So many things are happening. And I can vouch for that. You literally have to hit the pause button and watch each individual sequence play out to understand what's taking place.
Before we move on to some, MMA topics, some MMA news that we'll discuss, I wanted to ask one more question about, the betting side. Is what was the biggest upset for you? What was the biggest bet that you made and cashed out on this year?
This year, it was Carlos Diego Ferreira beating Anthony Pettis. That was, that was a favorite play, but that was a play where I was like, that was something I envisioned and I went big on. And as far as biggest upset, it wasn't this year, but when I saw Henry Cejudo fight Joseph Benavidez, then defeat Wilson Hayes, and I just knew he was coming. And when he was fighting DJ that second time, I saw he was like a plus 400 underdog, and I'm like, you know what, he's got a legitimate shot here. And we saw what he's been able to do, and I've rode that wave of him torching a number of fighters. It's kind of sad that he's left, but hopefully he comes back soon. I hear he might come back with to fight Garbrandt. I don't know if that's a good move for Cody, but we'll see. Maybe, who knows?
We'll see. All right. Now, so the first topic, I didn't even send you this topic because it just came across my desk like maybe an hour ago, which is let me put this on the screen real fast. Let me share this screen with you. Let's see. Where is it? Oh, here it is. Okay, so do you see that? You see that, right?
Yeah. What is that? Let's see.
So what it's saying is that
Esparza.
Bronsteter, who has been on the show before, he's saying that during an interview with Dana White, that Dana White was saying that Rose does not want a title shot.
Yeah.
And then they're looking at Carlo Esparza getting the next shot at the title against Weili Zhang. And then what is happening here, let me scroll down, is that Ariel Helwani is reporting that, he asked Rose Namajunas' fiance coach Pat Barry about this, and his response is that is absolutely not true. We absolutely want the title shot. Who would turn down a title shot? We just don't have to air this out publicly. If was some confusion, they can call us to clear it up. Now, when you look at this, like this kind of, I don't know what, like Dana White does this a lot, right?
Yeah, I mean, of course, tremendous amount of respect for Dana White and what he brings to the table. He's helped this organization rise out of the ashes and the industry itself. But I could see him potentially using this as a leverage play. But I also could see, I mean, we've seen what Rose has done in the past, and how she has turned down a title shot with Weili Zhang before, right?
Yeah.
So the fight that was supposed to go to, or went to Joanna, was supposed to go to Rose. So I honestly, I think we don't have enough information to make an assessment, but it does. I mean, from my end, I'd love to see Esparza fight Weili Zhang. I like what Weili Zhang brings to the table. I picked her to win against Joanna, and the Andrade fight also, and throughout her career, she's incredible. One thing I would love to see her fight in person, and I'm really looking forward to once we get beyond COVID. Looking to get to a few international fight cards. I'd love to see her fight out in China.
Yeah, I was there during when she beat Andrade. I was watching from cage side. That was one of the most incredible things. I've actually watched her win 2 titles cage side, like one regionally here in Asia, and the one that she won against Andrade in that knockout. It was pretty insane. Yeah, just when I look at this, it's like I said, Dana White, he likes to do these things publicly, and Pat Barry's right. You shouldn't. Maybe you should. I don't know. You shouldn't. It's the business, right? That he's trying to like pull some strings right now. He's trying to rile some people up, and I believe Rose and Carla have the same management, which is kind of weird too. So, I wonder what's going on behind the scenes. Is it a money thing? Is it a location thing? There must be something in the contract that they're sending over that doesn't satisfy one of the parties, right? And then now they're going to Carla because maybe Carla's a little bit easier to work with and she'll fight anywhere. Because I'm thinking that if Weili Zhang fights or defends the title next, she's not going to defend it in North America. I believe she's going to go back to Asia and defend it somewhere on this side of the world next year sometime. Or is it concerning to you that Weili, she hasn't fought since what was it, February, and she's going to return? It's probably going to be over a year.
It doesn't bother me, to be honest. I mean, you saw that fight, that 5-round war, and I think honestly, both of those fighters, for them to take a year off is a smart move to heal up. And also Carla, the fight against Amanda Ribas got pulled out from under us. She was supposed to take on Amanda. I would have loved to see that fight play out too. So many moving parts, and from a capping perspective, we need to really be quick on our toes. And you see fights that like, oh man, I got a great line on this fight, and we're ready to go, and then all of a sudden, boom, the fight gets canceled on fight week, or just literally hours before they're supposed to enter the octagon. So that creates some challenges. But Weili Zhang, I so much respect for her. I consider her the best fighter in that division, and we saw what Andrade ended up moving up a weight class, right?
Yeah, she did.
I'm looking forward to seeing who she ends up getting at 125 pounds.
Yeah, I feel like they might push her into that title fight just because she is a former champ, and former champ versus current champ.
that plays well in promotion wise, you know, if there's nobody else that's lined up. But we'll see what, you know, the UFC does. But I'm thinking Valentina, she's very easy to work with, especially with matchups. So where she's like, okay, just give me an opponent and give me the location, because she's always traveling all over the place. So it doesn't really matter where she fights, it seems like. So
Pound for pound fighter in the world in my book.
yeah, no doubt. I do you like that idea of Weili moving up and fighting Valentina?
I don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah, I don't like it either. I don't know why Dana White's so obsessed with that idea.
She wants the fight too, which is, I don't know if he was pushing that through for her. The other thing though is, I mean, there was a picture I posted. I'll try posting it again after this podcast. But there's a picture of Weili Zhang standing next to Henry Cejudo when she's out of camp, and she looks bigger, much bigger than Cejudo. It's really interesting how I wonder about her cut to that weight class, how difficult it is. I haven't seen her miss or come close. She's a professional.
Yeah, she doesn't seem like she struggles at all with weight or anything like that. Even with that travel schedule that she had before the last fight,
Mm-hmm.
she came in professional, came out, performed very well. She said that I believe she said that she didn't perform up to her abilities because of the travel schedule that she had ahead of that fight, and just like these time zone changes and all of that. But you know, fighters go through a lot of stuff, you know, emotionally, mentally, and physically ahead of fights. So it's just sometimes we never see the best fighter. And I feel like nowadays it's even harder because of COVID. You know what I mean? Like do you know the statistic? I wonder what the statistic is of fighters that contracted COVID, recovered, and came back and fought. I wonder what the statistic is on that.
I'll have to ask the MMA by numbers Twitter,
Yeah.
see if they can pull that up. But going back to the Weili Zhang fight, the way her corner carried her, I think it was the end of the third round or the end of the second round, her cornerman carried her to her corner, and she looked like she was almost dead to rights. And then to come back and flip that switch and take the later rounds, incredible performance in that bout. And I was all over Weili Zhang in that matchup. I know folks, a lot of folks thought it was a robbery and that it should have gone to Joanna, former champion, but I ended up scoring it for Weili Zhang. And I'm glad she has the belt. Looking forward to where she goes from here. I was hoping they would make the fight with Rose, because I think Rose is the best challenger at that weight class, but I don't know. She's turned down these fights before.
Yeah, I like Rose as the next challenger. I feel like she's the best test,
On her
the
feet.
toughest test right now. And I don't know. I don't know about Carla Esparza. You know, she is a former champ, but if you look at her performances, she hasn't had those like exciting, crazy, like dominant performances, right? But Rose, she's had these exciting fights.
Esparza knows she finds a way.
Yeah, she does.
They're notorious for that. Find a way.
So, you know, I like the Rose fight. I feel like the UFC needs to make that fight. And then you got the other Chinese girl that's coming up the ranks too, and she looked like she's a killer.
Yeah, excellent.
So, you know, if I had my way, if Rose doesn't want, I guess, to fight for the title, then give Carla the title shot. You know, you need to have Weili fight soon, because you know she hasn't fought in a long time, and then Rose could fight the other Chinese girl, Yan, and they could be on the same card. Why not?
No qualms fighting each other. I remember reading South China Morning Post that they would go to war with one another if need be. So
yeah, they have no problems. I actually did a pretty long interview with their strength and conditioning coach, and he's pretty much the strength and conditioning coach for all the top Chinese fighters in the UFC. And he told me, he's like, they'll fight each other. Don't worry about it. Like, you know, there's no problems with that. They want to be the best in the world. They want the belt, and they're friends. But when you step into that octagon, they're not friends anymore. They're going to go at it. And I feel like that could be one of the greatest fights.
you know if
of all time.
Lang is getting rebooked?
I have no idea, you know, that's kind of a shitty situation for him, you know, because he flew all the way from China
to fight, and then just got canceled the fight week. So it's
Get
crazy.
reimbursed for those efforts, you know?
I don't know. It's kind of crazy.
They don't show. I always wondered how that side of it works out.
Yeah. Now moving on, like the next thing is with all these free agent signings, right? And it seems like a lot of it is going towards Bellator, right? And I wanted to get your thoughts on that, of just all these fighters moving, across the board to Bellator, to PFL, back and forth.
Romero?
I mean, yeah, and Romero and Anthony Johnson, and now that light heavyweight division in Bellator, people always want to kind of, I guess, downgrade and look down on Bellator. But really, if you look at that light heavyweight division with Nemkov and Bader and a couple of other like really good prospects internationally, just because you're not known in North America doesn't mean you're not good. And and then you add those veterans in, when you stack it up against like the UFC, like what do you see? Do you see a lot of parallels there?
Yeah. It depends on the division you're talking about, to be honest. I know the light heavyweight division over there, they have Machida and a few other fighters, right, who could potentially, like Bader starting to get up there. And man, you got to wonder, is Romero's going to be competing at 205 pounds, I believe, over there. So they instantly make that fight with Bader. Oof. That has fireworks written all over it. But then you look at the bantamweight division, right? The UFC's bantamweight division is exploding with talent. You look at the Bellator 135-pound division. Magomedov competed this past weekend. You have Brett Johns, right, who's coming over. And to be honest, the bantamweight division, I think across the board, is the best division in mixed martial arts. I really believe that there's just so much talent. I can't wait until we've got Aldo against Peter Yan. We've got Casey Kenny against Dominic Cruz. I don't want to hijack the conversation, but that, as far as Bellator goes and just globally, that 135-pound division is chock full of so much talent.
Yeah, there's no hijacking. We go where it goes, man. Like if you want to go into the bantamweight division, I completely agree. I've talked to people about this all the time, and I think the bantamweight division is the best in the world. Like like across the board, like one championship, Bellator, UFC. What was the other promotion? Forgot. One championship, Bellator, UFC, and even Ryzen. If you look at Ryzen's bantamweight division, it's insane.
Yes, that's true. We got Menal Cape coming over, and the flyweights. A lot of these flyweights, they can move up to 135 pounds and look just as good, if not better, than they were fighting at flyweight. Dillashaw is going to be coming back at some point, and I've got so many fights on my calendar in 2021, circled, ready for when these when not only the odds break, but also just watching these come to fruition. It's going to be a beautiful thing. And this is cheers to 2021, because the train does not stop on December 19th. We've got a long way to go, and onward and upward. That's how I look at it. Yeah.
So Tristan, he's got a good idea. Bellator, they should do a Grand Prix. You got Bader, Nemkov, Corey Anderson, Yoel Romero, Anthony Johnson, Phil Davis, Machida, and maybe Mousasi too. That's a hell of a division right there.
Let's do it. Douglas Lima, right? Mousasi just made easy work of him. Now moves up to, I could see him coming up there. And I attended Strikeforce when they did the heavyweight Grand Prix with Cormier and Overeem and Sergey Karatanov and the whole crew. I think that's a wonderful idea. The only thing about that, though, Bellator seems to really draw things out for a whole year to take a Grand Prix. If they bunched it up into 6 months or even 4 months, barring the fighter health, of course, that's number one, and getting contracts signed and weight cutting. But if it depends on what weight class, I would be totally on board with a Grand Prix. I think that's a great idea.
It is a great idea. But at the same time, I just think that they should just come in and fight somebody like Yoel Romero. I don't think he should fight any of the top top guys at 205 because he hasn't fought at 205 in a long time. So you need to give him a tester, right? Have him fight one of the prospect coming up that has a good record, that has potential, and have Yoel fight him. I don't think they should just jump in. And I think Yoel did an interview and is talking about he thinks he's gonna fight Anthony Johnson in his first fight. That's crazy. I wouldn't see that.
I don't think it's that crazy though, because I'll be honest. Look, his biological clock is ticking.
Mm-hmm.
He's what? How old is he now? He's in his
40s
now. So you got to wonder. Father Time. No one, and I mean no one, can outrun Father Time. That's another quote. I mean, of course, PEDs can help, but you can try and outrun Father Time. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. If you look at it from that aspect, he's old. He doesn't have many fights left, and they're probably paying him a handsome sum.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony versus Anthony Johnson, that would put fannies in the seats. That would put eyeballs on the television screen. I would pay to see that in a heartbeat. It wouldn't last that long, though, I don't think.
Well, I feel like if they do that, that's like a #1 contender fight instantly.
Yeah. I was at Ryan Bader's fight against Rumble Johnson, and I was hyped for that. And then all of a sudden, boom, a minute in, Bader shoots, and it's over.
Yeah, he has the sickest power. It's unbelievable, like how and he's accurate too, which is another talent.
Yeah, he hasn't competed in a long time.
Yeah.
It's crazy to think he was competing at welterweight at one point.
Yeah, I guess you could balance the scales like that. Johnson hasn't competed in a while. Yoel's coming up to 205. He hasn't been there for a while. Yeah, I guess you could put that together and say whoever wins that proves that they're a top contender and have them fight Nemkov. But I still feel like Nemkov. Go ahead.
I was talking about variance and we didn't talk about fight IQ, also like in-fight decision-making that we've seen in the past. But for instance, who would have ever thought that Anthony Rumble Johnson would come out and try to wrestle and out-grapple Daniel Cormier in their fight, fight? That was, his legitimate game plan, and he was sticking to it. It ended up costing him, but these things happen in MMA sometimes.
Yeah, when you look at Anthony Johnson and you look at Yoel Romero and how they fight, it's and Anthony Johnson usually loses by submission. The last couple times he's lost is by submission, right? And Yoel Romero, he doesn't really attempt any submission, so it would be an exciting fight, right? When you look at it from that aspect.
You know what fight I would love to have seen or a rematch? Glover Teixeira, Rumble Johnson.
Again, the rematch? Yeah, I think now it's a little bit different situation.
Yeah.
Glover seems like he's a reborn fighter.
Yeah, incredible. You know who also has been reborn and reborn countless times? Alistair Overeem. I went in Pride Fighting Championships. I got to witness firsthand Alistair Overeem getting knocked out by Mauricio Shogun Rua. And they fought twice. Imagine seeing them fight for a third time at heavyweight, how that would play out if we had Alistair taking on Shogun for a third time. And some fighters just don't get that shot at redemption again. He's already had it twice. But if we could do rematches, there are a few of them that I would.
Oh, of course. Like I remember in the mid 2000s, K1 was still going strong, and Alistair Overeem, they had an event here in Korea. I think it was the Grand Prix for K1, and Alistair Overeem was the main event versus, I believe it was Gokhan Saki. I'm not for sure, but man, and I was kind of far from the ring, but he was like massive. Just looking at him from afar, fighting somebody another heavyweight, so-called heavyweight, and it was just like, Alistair Overeem is like, he's underappreciated, I think, in many ways.
Gosh, yeah, he talk about falling in love with the sweet science of the sport. Incredible to watch his transformation, and I got to see him perform at 205 pounds. But to watch that metamorphosis into a heavyweight, and then come back down from Ubereem to Econoreem. Now he's much more economical with the strikes, and you saw what he did to Augusto Sakai. That was an incredible performance. And like he said, the clock is ticking. This is my final run. And incredible that he's been able to do this. I mean, really, you watch his career, he makes his those documentaries, right?
Yeah.
The Ream
Yeah.
documentaries. His the person who is behind that, the editing and stuff, they do a tremendous job. And I've just been blown away by how he's been able to transform his career, utilize his strengths, keep his chin in check, and he's pretty darn close to getting back to that title. Especially now, I mean, Stipe's getting up there. You've got John Jones on the horizon. Who knows how it's going to play out? And there are a few weight classes where we haven't seen the top tier of the division perform in quite some time. It's interesting how their fighters are just sitting on the sidelines.
Yeah, the featherweight division, right?
Also, yep, we got Volkanovski sitting back, and
well, there's the rumors came out. I think Dana White said today or the other day that they're targeting Volkanovski Ortega in February.
Wow, and the Holloway fight, that's going to be wild against Calvin. Looking forward to that too.
It all depends how it plays out, but I could see the winner of Holloway Cater getting a title shot. I don't know. I think it all depends.
Top cream of the crop of the division. I mean, talk about fighters who have an unbreakable will and a skill set to match. You watched that Jeremy Stevens Calvin Cater fight. It was a man possessed. Calvin Cater was.
Yeah, I like Calvin Cater. He's like the blue collar style of fighter, man. He's just
his word, and he goes out there and does what he says he's going to do.
Yeah, I like talking to him. He's fun to talk to because he's just like, he has a little bit of trash talk, but it's like based on him kind of holding himself back. Because if he really went off, like it would be a different like side of him. And I hope we get to see that one day. I hope we get to see like that side of him because I know it's there. Because I've spoken to him like a few times, and sometimes I'll get it out of him a little bit. That's also about me interviewing people. It's like trying to get them to kind of reveal a little bit more of like kind of their real side. Because there's fighters that they have their persona where they come out and do interviews, and it's different from their persona in the gym or with their friends.
Right. Have you interviewed Colby Covington?
No, I've never interviewed Colby Covington.
Just curious, because I know that I've heard that he is a different persona off screen. Interesting. The other thing I wanted to mention, the Calvin Cater Dan Ige fight. That was an incredible fight this year too. Both two fighters, unbreakable wills. They made it to the final bell, and I mean, you saw I was on Ige against Barbosa, and I had a hunch, man. He's Dan Ige. If you could implant his toughness into any other fighter, you'd have a champion on your hands. He's got that.
Yeah, with Cater, you could actually put him in the argument for like breakout fighter of the year. To be honest with you, with the performance that he's had this year, people forget about him because, like you said, recency bias, man. Recency bias is not just this year; it's like this month or their last 2 weeks. People forget real quick, and I do too. I'm guilty of it.
You look at Kevin Holland. What? Yeah. He's 5 wins now in 2020, just climbing that ladder, and man, if he gets Chimaev next, we'll see what happens there. It's going to be
with the light heavyweight division in the UFC, it seems like they're holding back so Israel could take on Jan Blachowicz. Do you think that's the right move to make? Do you think like them putting the middleweight division somewhat on hold? Because it seems like they might put an interim title fight for the middleweight division.
I thought Glover earned it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the right move is to give Glover a shot, and if they come out of that fight unscathed, whoever comes out of that fight unscathed with the belt, give them Adesanya. That's just one humble man's opinion, but that's what I would do. I think I'm at first when you saw what Conor did, I mean, it looked great, double champ, etc. But the reality is it really holds up divisions and hurts a lot of fighters who are looking to get paid and make a living to support their families. And that's the tough, tough sport when you have such a top heavy situation. And also motivation too. People, they want to get that strap. They want to get that belt. And if it's sitting on the sidelines, and then you have, Cejudo who walks away, creates problems too. But thank goodness that flyweight division is still rolling, because it's that fight this past weekend or last weekend, incredible.
Yeah, speaking of last weekend, 256, the flyweight division, people come out and say like it's the most exciting it has ever been. And I'm thinking like, what are you talking about? Like, you don't remember when Demetrious Johnson, like, I feel like everybody just forgets Demetrious Johnson and what he's done, and how, like what kind of, I guess it was just, is it because he was just too dominant and that's why everybody thinks so?
Yes, I was thinking, I was driving today thinking about that, and I really think that's the case, that he wasn't met with too many threats. He was so dominant. I mean, besides, the fights against Dominic Cruz back in the day, he's really, sometimes he'll take minimal risk, but then sometimes, like he did against Ray Borg, he'll do some spectacular technique that we haven't seen take place inside the octagon. So I really think that's part of it. And then also George St. Pierre, you look back at his career, and towards the end of it, he was just so dominant. Jake Shields, etc. Nick Diaz was able to kind of walk through opponents and not just do enough, but he would win, 50-45. He'd win dominant decisions. But I think it was the level of competition too. Demetrious is, that great. And it's, in a way, it's sad to see that he had left, because he still, in my eyes, had a lot to offer. And we didn't see him move back up, though. I would have liked to have seen him move back up to 135 pounds to see how that would have played out, because we know that bantamweight division is so stacked.
I think that he wanted to move up, but he also wanted to be compensated well for moving up, and I feel like that's where the roadblocks came, and then that's where the UFC kind of turned on Demetrious Johnson in many ways. Because if you look at the timeline, of how everything played out, it just played out in that fashion. GSP and Demetrious Johnson in this era, I feel like those two are interchangeable as who's the greatest of all time. Like I was watching the sport very closely during their reigns, and Anderson Silva's up there too, but then there's some weird stuff with him, some asterisks for him too. So anyways, but yeah, like Demetrious Johnson, great. Now he's fighting over there. What is it, in one championship, and I think like he's gonna pretty much do the same thing most likely over there.
He's able to do what he wants to do, and happiness, you can't put a number on that. That's priceless. So I'm happy for what he accomplished in his career, and was able to kind of walk away almost, you'd say, on top. He did lose to Cejudo, but no one should ever hang their head, with what he's accomplished in the sport. He's incredible ambassador to the sport, great champion, and he is sorely missed, really, in my eyes.
Yeah, we don't get that. Like, what do you think about Figueiredo? What do you think his potential is? Do you feel like he'll reign supreme for a while?
He brings so many characteristics of what folks like to watch when they tune in. He does not back down. He will walk forward with his hands down, landing power strikes at will. Like, his striking accuracy is incredible. When you look at the amount of output, it's minimal output, but he makes those strikes count. Morono, I honestly have no idea how he was able to continuously eat those heavy strikes for the length of time that he did, especially the elbows, as he was stepping in, the body shots. Figueiredo was putting in some serious work, and Morono, hats off to him too. He hung in there, and one thing about Figueiredo, I mean, you have the Formiga loss where he was dominated basically and put on his back. One thing in this fight against Morono, he would not accept position. on the bottom. He did literally whatever it took, even if he had to foul, gouge the eyes and the groin strike, etc. Whatever it takes. Part of me, you don't want to see that because, of course, he's pushing the envelope. But the reality is, most referees are going to give you a free groin shot on the house. He did get a point deducted, and that ultimately impacted the outcome of the fight. But you can confidently say that Morono didn't win. He didn't do enough to actually walk away with the victory. And the fifth round, to know that Figueiredo had enough wherewithal, positioning down hammer fists, that sends a message to the judges. And unfortunately, in situations like these, he did win that fifth round, Figueiredo, but it was a close fight, much closer than I originally anticipated.
I would respectfully disagree. I don't feel like it was a close fight. I felt like Morono just was able to sustain the punishment. And I feel like Figueiredo, man, you're right, man. He's a guy that you just look at his style and it's just blockbuster style, man. I love it. And there's a lot of people that
his ground game. We've seen shades of glimpses of it against Benavidez and Perez and a few other fighters, but there's a lot that we haven't seen. I get that vibe, and also just his management and knowing what's going on behind the scenes. It's there's more to see the eye.
I like Figueiredo. He's a lot of people thought Morono won. I don't see that. I thought Figueiredo won that fight clear. It was a clear decision to win. If you look at Morono, man, he was messed up at the end of that fight. Like, he took a lot of shots, and a lot of people in the comments, they got, they thought Morono won 2, 3, and 4. He says I gave Morono 2, 4 as well. And there was point deduction thrown in there as well. Point deduction. I feel like there should be more point deductions in MMA because I don't feel like the warnings really help, because you get a warning in the back when the referee comes up to you and tells you, like, like, these are the rules. Like, this is how I'm going to ref your fight. Like, that's the warning, right? And if because sometimes it looks like it's not, intentional, but it could be intentional. We don't know. We don't know at all. So I don't know, like fence grabs. I don't like that should be something that's intentional, right? That's not just something that you just like, oh, I just did it naturally. Just
cage grabs. Cage grabs. That's something that really, my pet peeve. And then also is when fighters miss weight. If they were able to do a point deduction for fighters who missed weight, that would solve so many of the problems. You come into this fight down a point. You're going to see changes across the board. I don't know how they could pull that off with the commissions out there, but that's something that really needs to happen. You go into these fights, you cap the fights, and then somebody comes in and they have a 4+ pound weight advantage. It skews a lot of the outcomes sometimes, even though sometimes we see the fighters who miss weight end up losing sometimes too. So, but then I go back to like Michel Prazeres. That guy came in with a weight advantage in so many different fights, and the Green fight, Desmond Green, and just kind of smothered folks. Mads Burnell, he's another guy who went to Bellator, right? Incredible fighter. We could invest in specific fighters, buy stock in certain fighters. Mads Burnell would be, right high up there, but he was stunted. His career was stunted because he was Michel Prazeres came in overweight, and Mads Burnell was the one coming in on short notice. I'll never forget that fight. So it just irks me when that happens, because that's the one thing you can control. You can't control the outcome of the fight, but if you come in and meet the contracted weight, what else do you have to do? You get in there and perform. You make the contracted weight. It's you eat less, move more. How much more simple can it be? You eat less, move more.
this weekend you got UFC Vegas 17, the last UFC event of the year, and I kind of like how the UFC is doing it. They did it last year too, where they have like an event like mid December, and then they kind of shut it out for like a month, and then return early the next year. I enjoy that. I think it's a good idea that they're doing it. They don't need to do end of the year shows. So with what I see in this card is the welterweight matchups. Like we know we lost that one major one, the main event, but we still have a few good welterweight matchups. You got Wonder Boy, you got Jeff Neal, you got what is it? Michelle Pereira versus Chaos Williams. You got Anthony Pettis versus Alex Morono. There's those three welterweight matchups. I love these matchups, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on Wonder Boy. He says that he's out there to prove that he's not a gatekeeper. Would you consider him a gatekeeper?
Not necessarily. I mean, you just see what he did against Vicente Luque.
Yeah.
Last time you saw Vicente Luque like tuned up to that degree where he wasn't you had Wonder Boy who was not absorbing the damage. It wasn't coming back at him. So I do not consider Stephen Thompson a gatekeeper. He, in my eyes, is still near the top of the division, even at 37, almost 38 years of age now. He's getting up there. But Jeff Neal, he's another guy who fights out of a great camp, is only 30 years of age, is willing to enter the pocket. And we saw what he did versus Nico Price. But this is an interesting matchup because he doesn't have an opponent who's just going to be marching forward like Camacho, like Mike Perry, Slaughter, who's coming at him. He's going to have someone who is going to take his time. We saw the Darren Till fight, for instance, where you saw two strikers who were content picking their spots. And I could see that happening here. Granted, you watch what Anthony Pettis did. That's a flash in the pan type situation where Stephen Thompson was working his jab, putting in work and making Anthony Pettis look like he shouldn't be there at times. And then all of a sudden, boom, that Superman punch across the fence, off the fence, and changed Pettis changed Thompson's trajectory of his career. So in my eyes, this is a very, very closely lined fight for a reason. This is potentially it could potentially go to the judges. I see these fighters both feeling each other out and taking their time and picking their spots. And I wouldn't be surprised if it hits the scorecards, to be honest. What do you think? Do you have any predictions for this one?
Yeah, I feel like it's gonna go to the scorecards. I feel like you got a pressure striker in some ways with Jeff Neal, and then you got a slick counter striker, right? And that has great movement in Thompson, and it is one of those like who's gonna be able to pick their spots, and we haven't seen Jeff Neal rocked and face adversity really at all, and I wonder if Thompson's gonna be able to do that to him. Because we've seen Thompson do it. We've seen him rocked and come back, so we know he's got that dog in him.
Yeah, the Woodley fights really showed us what he's made of. And I'll be honest, my sons have met Stephen Thompson, and he's the nicest guy in the world. And my son began taking karate because of him, and he looks up to him, and great ambassador to the sport. But he's also a badass, and you look what he did to our friend who's on Jorge Masvidal. You go watch that fight back, and a lot of people wrote Stephen Thompson off before that fight. Look how that played out. So Thompson does have a killer instinct and a mean streak, and he's able to get it done if he has to. So this fight's honestly a toss up, and it's a very closely lined fight. So I could see it going either way.
Now, the Michelle Pereira and Chaos Williams fight. This is just like the name Chaos. Like he brings chaos. Like he brings that deadly power. And Michelle Pereira is the one that loves to take risks. And he also has the deadly power too in his strikes. It's like not just in his punches, it's in his kicks. He's more versatile. Could I say that? Am I right? He's more versatile.
He's got a great jiu-jitsu game also.
Yeah.
back on that too. Yeah, fascinating matchup. And you see the 11 losses on Michel Pereira's record, and those jump off the page at you. But then you watch the fights and they make sense. You know, he goes for anything under the sun. He's a entertainer first, a fighter second at times. But the Imadaev fight, you watch that fight back, and it seemed like he got his bearings, and he really put a concerted effort into staying composed, staying technical, and was able to showcase his skills. I'll be honest, Williams, he's got the power. We haven't seen much of him inside of the octagon, but if you watch his fights on the regional scene, he's gone the distance against far competition. And in my eyes, Michel Pereira is a more talented fighter with a more robust skill set. It's just a matter of in-fight IQ, the decisions that he makes. This is his fight to lose. I think Michel Pereira should be favored in this spot, and that he's the better overall fighter. But you talk about momentum, you talk about recency bias. Chaos Williams is the flavor of the month, and he may potentially be the real thing. That's the other thing. We do see fighters who they fought marginally on the regional scene and then blow up at the UFC level. So he's a young fighter. Both of these fighters are young too. You look at Pereira and you're like, how the heck does this guy have so many fights at this age? And but Pereira has brought his camp to Las Vegas this time around and seems to be taking things seriously, and got a new contract, I believe, from the UFC. So it should be one hell of a fight. It's just a matter of how is Chaos Williams going to handle the darting in and out and the unpredictability of Pereira. What do you think about this?
Yeah, because Chaos in his last fight, and you could say in the fight before that, the guys kind of just stood there in front of him. Yeah. And kind of was able to they were gonna, match power for power, right? And they were just gonna stand for him, and Chaos was just able to land first, and he's very accurate. I'm not gonna take that away from him. But I watched Michel Pereira fight, I believe, 2 times live in Korea when he fought for Road.
Wow.
And then in one of the fights, he walked out, and we were in a hotel, like, lobby hall thing, like, place. It wasn't even an arena. And they were having, like, this special, like, end of the year card, and he was there. He did, like, 15 backflips to the cage. Like, it was insane. I was like, how does this guy have that much energy? And he goes in there and knocks out the dude and did a couple backflips inside the cage. So I just hope that he kind of turns that down a little bit, even though it's exciting to see and everybody loves it. But I feel like we've seen that already, so he doesn't need to do it as much. And if he does that, if he shows us what he can do better than he did his last fight, because his last fight was pretty good, I see him winning this fight.
Yeah,
like I think he's the favorite. I like him in this fight.
He is the favorite. It's a very closely lined fight, almost at a pick 'em right now. But it should be interesting. It's going to come down to if Chaos Williams is able to land the bomb on Pereira, and also if Pereira ends up making a bonehead decision in there. But if he finds his P's and Q's, this is Pereira's fight to win.
And then the last one is a very interesting matchup. They just put it together last minute, which is Anthony Pettis versus Alex Morono. A big opportunity for Morono, and I think Anthony Pettis this is his last fight on his contract, and he's taking on Alex Morono, which is kind of a weird matchup, in many ways, because you would think the UFC would want to get the most bang out of their buck for Anthony Pettis, but I don't see Anthony Pettis fighting again in the UFC after this. Do you see that?
I think this is the end of the road for Anthony Pettis, win or lose, to be honest, for this specific organization. But I can't vouch for what he's going to end up doing or what contract could potentially be offered there. I did fade Anthony Pettis with my largest play of the year with Carlos Diego Ferreira. In this spot, though, you got Morono, who he does have holes in his game. Granted, very aggressive fighter, does have a ground game. We know Anthony Pettis has a ground game too. He's submitted Charles Oliveira, right? So you got a former champion who's you look how the mighty have fallen, and it's a sad state of affairs that it's gotten to this point. But I would have the odds favor Anthony Pettis, and I do lean Anthony Pettis in this spot. It's just a matter of inside of the smaller octagon. I'd like to see him try to win this fight at distance because he's the much cleaner striker. You watch the Reese McKee fight. Morono's throwing overhand right after overhand right. It seemed to be landing at will. Those punches, I do not believe, are going to be there to land against Anthony Pettis. He's too slick, has great footwork, and I mean, his back has been up against the wall forever now, Anthony Pettis, and he's folded. He's been hurt, but he got the Nate Diaz fight too, so I believe that Anthony Pettis should be favored in this spot. But it's sad, it's sad that it's come to this point. But on the other side of the coin, you do have a guy who's fighting, and he is. Do you want it to look like BJ Penn out there? You got to wonder because you don't want to see it get that bad. But I think he should beat Morono here.
Yeah, I see that Anthony. I see why Anthony Pettis is favored, and then I also look at him being on the last fight of his contract, and maybe he's already has one foot out the door, and he's maybe already discussed things with other promotions, so it doesn't matter if he wins or loses. And Morono, one thing about Morono is like he likes the dogfight, and I interviewed Morono, and he's like, I want a dogfight. And one thing about Anthony Pettis is he gets to a certain point during a dogfight where it's almost like a switch turns on, and he's just like he doesn't want to be there, like it just he doesn't kind of put the pedal to the metal at some point. And then, like, even I could see an injury stoppage in this fight, to be honest with you.
I wouldn't be surprised. That wouldn't surprise me one bit.
Yeah, so I'm not saying Anthony Pettis is done, and I'm not saying that he quits or anything like that, but I see like sometimes in those dogfights, and he's lost a lot of those dogfights. If you look back at his record and the fights that he's won, they've been kind of like early on, or he's dominated the fights, or there's like quick knockouts or whatever. So I'm looking at Morono for the upset, to be honest with you. But I don't bet on fights, so I'm just like, I'm just gut feeling. You know what I mean? Last week, my gut feeling was who did I have a gut feeling on? It was the co-main event, I believe. Who was the co-main event last?
Against Ferguson.
Yeah, that was my gut feeling. My gut feeling was Oliveira was going to win that fight last week. And that was my gut feeling pick, and I'm not an expert at picking, so don't take my advice if you're watching this. But yeah, that was my gut feeling. So this week's gut feeling is Morono is going to beat Anthony Pettis, but we never know. We might see a Showtime something in that ring just to go out on top for Anthony Pettis. I love Anthony Pettis. I've been watching him since WEC days, and you probably have too.
We'll find Saturday night.
Yeah, it's just
questions will get answered. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
Unless the COVID, situation stops it, but we'll keep our fingers crossed that doesn't happen.
Yeah. All right. One more last thing, man, before I let you go is every guest I ask them about like there's the UFC Hall of Fame, and I feel like that's just too narrowed off. You know what I mean? Like it's a UFC, and there's too many things going on in that Hall of Fame. I feel like we should just broaden it out and say, okay, if there was an MMA Hall of Fame,
right,
who would you induct into this Hall of Fame? It doesn't matter what promotion, dead or alive. Who do you have?
I've thought about this. It's a fighter who has fought at both 155 pounds and 170 pounds, a fighter who's fought in Pride Fighting Championships as well as UFC. It's a fighter whose only losses are to Matt Hughes, George St. Pierre, BJ Penn, and Frankie Edgar. It's a fighter who, with only a 66-inch reach, known as a wrestler, was able to outbox Nick Diaz on the feet. You know who I'm leaning? You know who I'm talking about? A fighter with a 36-4-1 record, none other than the muscle shark, Sean Shirk.
Oh, okay.
I am blown away by what Sean Shirk was able to do, and also meeting him in person. And seeing, he's really, honestly, he's like 5'2". Mm-hmm. I have no idea how he was able to compete and dominate in a way. You watch the Florian fight, he went to war with a lot of these fighters throughout the years, and maybe had some help in the way of PEDs at some point, but also you can't knock him for what he was able to accomplish. And a 36-4-1 record is incredible. So he would be my Hall of Fame nominee, and he also had to walk away due to injuries. He still had some stuff in the basement, so to speak, some matchups that were still on the table. He wanted to face Royce Gracie in Bellator. That ended up not happening. And I would have liked to have seen that. Fought Matt Hughes, in his prime. These guys fought GSP when GSP was on the up and up. Fought Frankie Edgar in his prime, and gave these guys a run for their money.
Yeah. So Sean Shirk, incredible talent, former champ, and he's just overshadowed by BJ Penn. I feel like because of BJ Penn, people don't recognize him as much, and the rumors of the PEDs. But back then, it's like you got to kind of put that to the wayside and just say, look at what he did and what he accomplished in the sport. And even sometimes I forget about Sean Shirk, and then people remind me, look at Sean Shirk. I'm like, yes, that guy was incredible, a talent.
If you get the chance, ask all your viewers, go UFC Fight Pass, go watch Sean Shirk against Nick Diaz. Incredible performance. He outboxes Nick Diaz on the feet. And I was blown away by that. Nick was coming in like this slick boxer with a jiu-jitsu background, and Shirk just made easy work of him. It was incredible. A huge size discrepancy. I know Shirk was muscled up, but did not expect that to happen. And you watch his fights across the board, and then meeting him in person, I was just blown away. I'm like, how the hell did this guy do that? But and I met Matt Serra too, and Serra's a few inches taller than Sean Shirk, believe it or not. Yeah, so incredible what they've been able to do. Great guys.
Great, man. Yeah, great induction. And man, it was a great chat, man. I learned so much from you just explaining everything. If you guys are joining the stream right now, just go back to the beginning and listen to the first like 30 to 40 minutes, and Mike just breaks down all this stuff about the betting side, and maybe you learn something, and maybe you start putting in bets and you start winning, man. Because whenever I get messages from people that say like, I use your interviews to figure out bets and I won because of this tip or this comment or whatever, I'm happy for them, man. I'm just very happy for people if they benefit, something positive from the interviews. And Mike, thank you so much. Go watch Mike's stream every week before the events on Sunday or Saturday morning. MMA Odds Breakers. Follow him on Twitter. Yeah, man. What can we expect from you for 2021? Pretty much the same, right?
I would also just give that right back to you. You're the straw that stirs the drink, John, and the way you're able to cultivate knowledge for us and give back to the community, it's a two-way street. So my Saturday morning breakdown at MMA Odds Breaker is it's a free service that we provide, and I'll break down the whole card, every card for from here on out, also 2021, looking ahead. But looking forward to continuing to break down fights onward and upward. Last week, we had a rough week, but those things happen in this game, and looking to bounce back and take one card at a time.
Yeah, that's it, man.
Thank you, John, for this opportunity. And also thank you to all of the other cappers out there and people who are invested in this game. This is a team effort. Everyone is in this together, really. And we all love fights. We all love breaking down fights. There's no egos in this game. And really, we're here because we love mixed martial arts. And without that, our lives would suffer. So we're grateful for that. So thank you, John, and thanks to Mixed Martial Arts.
Yeah, make sure you guys go subscribe to MMA Odds Breakers. Subscribe to this page, like, share, whatever you need to do. And we'll be back next week with the coach, with one of the top coaches in the world. and we're gonna do another live chat. Be back at this time. Thank you so